welcome to day 104 of Bible 365. So I'm outside. It's nice out. Today is day 104. It is April 13th. And today our reading is 1 Samuel 15 through 17:31. So a little bit of background and a little bit of what we're supposed to be doing. So if you have just gotten here, this is the very first time you've ever seen any of my videos. I'm Kathy Carter, and Bible 365 means that we are reading through the Bible in 365 days. So I'm doing a chronological reading of the Bible to help understand who God is through reading his word. So it's really easy to show up at church on Sunday, and I don't want to take anything away from any of that, but the point is that we have books at home and we are not reading them. God has given us this. He has provided his word to us in a book, free in most of your churches. You probably almost all get it for free, and still we aren't reading. We're depending on somebody else to tell us, and I know those people are learned, and I know that they've done the work, but we can do the work as well. And so I am urging people to get in, especially in this day and age where there's so much social media, there's so much stuff, and there's so many people that seem to know things about the Bible, but they really don't know the Bible. They seem to know things about God, but don't really know God. They seem to hear things about Jesus, but don't really know Jesus, right? I don't want us to be those people, because those people, if you're in a different country and you don't have any scripture or anything, that's where I think that God is like, okay, you don't know me. I haven't really given you the information to know me. You have no excuse if you're here in one of these countries that has Bibles available all the time. So that's my tirade, my soapbox. But we are in the book of Samuel today, and we are going to be meeting David for the first time. So if you have never been with me, go back to the beginning after you've listened and after you kind of get the gist of what's happening. Go back to the beginning, Genesis 1, start at the foundation, build up so you know exactly who we're going to meet and exactly why it matters. We are now with Samuel, and with Samuel is Saul as the king. So Israel has begged for a king, and the Lord gave Israel Saul. It has not worked out so amazing, and we're going to see today why and what that means. So going into 1 Samuel 15. So I didn't go back too much, so I didn't give you too much of a background because it takes a ton of time. But again, I want you to go back and kind of get some of it yourself. But just remember that this is when Israel is, it's after the time of Judges. This is the first king that has come, and they are in the land of Canaan, in and around the land of Canaan, and they have taken over most of that land, but not all of that land. There are still other people in that land. Can you see the two dogs back there? Okay, he's coming up. That little one. That's the one that I'm still babysitting, forever babysitting that dog, and he barks constantly. So if he barks, I apologize. All right, so here we go. Saul is constantly at war, and we have been told that he's going to be constantly at war. So if we go into verse 1 here, we're in 1 Samuel 15, and Samuel said to Saul, I'm the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over the people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is a message he gets. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I'm going to punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them. So Israel was coming up and out of Egypt, and the Amalekites kept them from doing certain things. And so God's like, I got a king now. I'm going to take you guys in, and I'm going to destroy the Amalekites because they waylaid the people. So Saul, if we go into verse 4, Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 from Judah. Saul goes into the city, and he sees some Kenites in there, and he tells them, listen, this war is not against you. You've always been good to us. You did not waylay us in the land of Egypt. So you guys go, because we're going to destroy the Amalekites. So it says Saul attacked the Amalekites, and then, so this is what Samuel told him. This is the important thing. In verse 3, he says, go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. So no matter what you think of this, right? So your heart can be stirred in whatever your thoughts are on this. This is what God told Saul to do. So this was what God commanded Saul to do, was to go in, kill everyone in there. right? And we can see that when Joshua took them into the land of Israel, they didn't listen to everything that God said then, and things happened. He says to Saul, destroy everybody in here. I have given them all to you. Destroy all of the animals, everything. Take nothing. So it says in verse 8, he took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive, and all his people he totally destroyed with a sword. But Saul and the army spared Agag and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak they totally destroyed. So they made this conscious choice that they said, this is good, we're not going to destroy that. We're going to take it for ourselves. That's not what God told them to do. God said destroy everything. They said we're going to kill the weak and the despised. Big deal. All right, so then we move on to verse 10. The word of the Lord came to Samuel. So Samuel is not with Saul in this area. Samuel is in his own area, and the word of the Lord comes to Samuel where he is, and he says, I regret that I have made Saul king because he's turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. So he is furious, and then Samuel is so upset because Samuel anointed him king. And even though Samuel didn't want to make kings because he knew that this was going to happen, the Israelites begged him to make a king. So he's really upset about it. He cries out, and then he goes to meet Saul. And he's saying to Saul, so Samuel kind of comes in really upset. And he says, in verse 13, when Samuel reached him, Saul says, the Lord bless you. I've carried out the Lord's instructions. And Samuel's like, really? Well, then why do I hear these sheep bleating, making noise? Bleating, and not bleeding like bleeding out, but bleat with a T. Why do I hear these sheep bleating in the wilderness? Like, how come I can hear sheep? How come I can hear goats? That's funny because I told you to destroy everything. And then Saul answers, well, the soldiers brought them. So here we go. Now Saul's in charge. The soldiers brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best of the sheep and the cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God. But we totally destroyed the rest. And Samuel's like, enough. He says, let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. So Saul doesn't even know that the Lord reached out to him. He said, although you were once small in your own eyes, because remember, he came to this in such a humble way. He said, who am I? I'm just a Benjamite. I'm from a small tribe. And in that small tribe, I'm even a smaller clan inside that small tribe. He said, you came to me, you were once small. And then I made you the tribe of the heads of Israel. The Lord anointed you king over Israel and then sent you on a mission. Why did you not obey the Lord? Why did you pounce on the plunder and do evil in the eyes of the Lord? And he says, but I did. I did obey the Lord. I went on the mission that you assigned me. The soldiers took sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of what was devoted to God, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. And then Samuel comes with us. Samuel replies in this little poem. He says, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? Now, if that's not a smack in the face, I really don't know what is. All right. So, I've been pretty open, and I consistently am open with myself. I really struggle to obey, and not just the Lord. I struggle, and really, like, I didn't even follow the Lord for the first 32 years of my life, but I have always struggled with obedience. When someone tells me to do something, I literally want to do the opposite, unless, much like Saul, I recognize that somehow it's good for me, right? So I'm like, well, I'll take out the little ones, right? Like, that's no big deal, but I'm going to save the big ones, or I'm going to save the best ones, or why should I give up that money, or why should, right? Like, so when it comes to following the rules, I really enjoy the ones that cater to me, and I don't enjoy the ones that don't, right? So obedience is hard work for me. I'm getting better because I'm being prayerful about it, but obedience is hard work for me. So I tend to think of myself as rebellious. But even these little slights, like Saul was acting as if he was being obedient, and yet it were these small things that he wasn't doing. He wasn't fully and completely trusting and obeying in the Lord. And so Samuel says that sacrifices really don't matter as much. Not that they don't matter. They don't matter as much as obedience does, right? So he's going, well, I didn't obey because I wanted to sacrifice. And the Lord is like, I didn't want your sacrifice. I wanted your obedience, right? That sacrifice was something totally different. I would tell you about the sacrifice at another time. Right now, I wanted you to obey the commands that I gave you. And he says in verse 23, for rebellion, right? So acting against the Lord, rebellion is like the sin of divination, which I've been told the sin of divination would get you stoned. So they didn't want them doing this. Arrogance, thinking you're better than, thinking you didn't need to follow the laws, the rules of God. That's the evil of idolatry. So that's worse than idolatry, worse than worshiping another God or having another God in your home. And he says, because they rejected their word of the Lord, I'm rejecting you as king. So because of this battle, now he's already had his issues. It said his kingdom was not going to reign, or his kingdom was not going to reign forever. But now he's like, you rejected the Lord, done. I reject you as king. I'm going to go out and make another one. And then Saul says to Samuel, Saul is trying to be, he's trying to be sorrowful, and he was seeking forgiveness, right? But he's like, I've sinned. I violated the Lord's commands. Here we go. Ready? I was afraid of the men, and so I gave in to them. I beg you to forgive me and come back to me so I may worship the Lord. I'm not saying he wasn't afraid of the men. So I don't want to take any of that away. I don't want to make an assumption that he's just being a jerk and he's doing whatever he wants. But number one, he's the leader, right? So whether he was afraid of the men or not, he is the one in charge. It was his rule that they were supposed to be following, whether he was afraid of them or not. Number two, even if he was afraid of them, he was supposed to be obeying the Lord's commands. So remember, again, and I've mentioned this a number of times, going all the way back to Adam and Eve, and it's just funny seeing it there this year for the first time, is not to take away and not to add, right? So he took away. He said, well, the Lord, no, he actually added. He said, I killed everybody, but I'm going to sacrifice to you. Well, the Lord didn't ask for that. The Lord asked for him to kill everyone in that area, which sounds awful coming from my mouth, but that's what the Lord asked. And there's a reason that the Lord asks it, because the Lord is the Lord. And no matter what he asks, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Now, of course, we need to recognize if it's from him. This Saul knew was from him because it was from Samuel, and Samuel was the one whose prophecies never failed. He's the one that they knew was the one that was with the Lord, right? So all of these things Samuel understood, and yet he still didn't obey fully. So he says, I've sinned. Samuel says no. And he's like, I'm not going to go back with you. And then Saul is essentially like, he says, the Lord has torn it. The kingdom is not with you anymore. And then he said, so right now he's like, at this point, he's like, the Lord has made a decree, right? So the Lord has now said, done. And then he says, he who is the glory of Israel, which is the Lord, he does not lie. So when he says done, done, he does not change his mind. He said, done, done. He's not a human being that he should change his mind. So now that you come back and you go, oh, but I'm so sorry, I really didn't mean it. God is like, done. I've said it. I've done it. I've put it into place. This is what it is. So then Saul replies, I've sinned, but please honor me before the elders and come with me. And so Saul does go with him so he can worship the Lord. Now, Samuel comes big here. In verse 32, it says, he says, bring me King Agag. And then Agag comes to him, and Samuel says to him, as your sword has, so we can see that this king is evil. As your sword has made women childless, so will your mother be childless among women. And then he puts him to death. Until the day Samuel dies, he never goes to see Saul again. So he's done with Saul. And I'll tell you what, he's brokenhearted about it. So this is another area where he needs to obey the Lord. And he's sad about it. It's not like he's happy. He's not so mad at Saul that he never wants to talk to him again. He's devastated that Saul didn't do the things that he was supposed to do. Like he's brokenhearted about it. But the reality is that he didn't. And now another king is going to come in his place. And so we're going to see who that is. So it says in 16, the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I've rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. We're going to go to Jesse at Bethlehem, and we're going to select a new king. And so then Samuel's kind of like, how can I do this? What's it going to look like? And he said, just go there, say you're going to sacrifice, and then you're going to invite Jesse and all of his sons to the sacrifice. So that's what he does. He goes there. He brings Jesse and his sons. Jesse brings his sons, and Samuel starts looking through them. He sees the first one. He's like, ooh, this one's big. This one could probably be king. And the Lord says, stop looking at outward appearances. That's not what I do. I look at what's inside the heart. And so he sees all of the sons, and none of them are the right son. And so Samuel goes, oh, Berkey. And then Samuel goes, hey, do you have any more sons? And Jesse was like, I do, but this one is out in the field tending sheep. So this is the youngest son. This son is out shepherding, which is the lowest job of the sons. And it's probably because he's the youngest son. And so this is not the most honored. This is not the best of the sons, right? This is not one, again, much like we saw with the tribe of Benjamin, right? This is not one that people would normally think would be king. So he comes in and he says, so it says he sent for him. So going down to verse 12, he sent for him and brought him in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. So there was something to be said about the way that David looked and the way that David acted. And it says, so then Samuel takes a horn of oil and anoints him in the presence of his brothers. And then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. And then Samuel left and he went to Ramah. So then all the brothers were there and they saw this happen. Now it says, here we go. We're going back to Saul. And it says in verse 14, now the Spirit of the Lord had departed Saul. So once God was essentially done with him, the Spirit of the Lord had departed him. And then the Lord sent an evil spirit to torment him. So even though he was still king, the Lord sent an evil spirit to torment him. And now what happens is this evil spirit is tormenting him. Everyone knows it. All the people are like, oh, this evil spirit is tormenting him. We have to bring someone here to calm him down. And so we need someone who can play the lyre and be able to calm him when the evil spirit comes upon him. Lucky enough, they found David. So it says, find someone. If we go in verse 17, Saul says, find someone who plays well and bring him to me. And then verse 18, one of the servants says, I've seen this son of Jesse of Bethlehem. He knows how to play the lyre. He's a brave man and a warrior. So now we know this on top of that. He's healthy, he's attractive, he's also brave, and he's a warrior. He speaks well, and of course he's fine looking. And the Lord is with him. So we know he's someone who loves and honors the Lord. So Saul sends messengers and brings David. And then he comes and he brings gifts as well. So David enters his service. Every time he plays, calms Saul down, and Saul feels good about everything. So is that why the Lord brought an evil spirit, was to get David into the camp? I'm not sure. Is it just because Saul had already turned against the Lord, and so this was a punishment for Saul? I'm not sure of that as well. So I'm sure there can be some other reasons why the Lord would send an evil spirit to Saul. I'm assuming it has something to do with what Saul has done and the way Saul has behaved towards the Lord that would bring this on him, to his detriment, of course. But it's tormenting him as he's doing all these things. So as he's leading the people, it's tormenting him. And he has a lot more battles to come. So moving on to verse 7 or chapter 17, it says, the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soka in Judah. So we're going to see, this is a little bit harder for me to visualize. So the Philistines come and they're in this camp, but they're sort of like up on the mountain of a camp. And then the Israelites are also up on the mountain of a camp. And then they kind of meet down in the valley, is what it seems like when I'm reading this. That's kind of what it seems like. And they meet down there all the time. And when they meet down there, this huge giant called Goliath, which I feel like even if you have never read a Bible before, you probably know the story, at least the gist of some of the story. But this giant called Goliath comes and meets down, and he kind of messes with them. So here's what we know about him. He's around 9 to 10 feet. So he's literally a giant. The armor that he wears weighs in the neighborhood of 125 pounds. So he's extremely strong on top of it. He has a javelin, and the point of the javelin weighs 15 pounds. And I'm saying that like, it seems like it's not that heavy, but I'm someone who lifts weights, and on a regular, I couldn't walk around with a 15-pound weight, plus that extra 125 pounds, plus throw that 15-pound weight. When I'm in war, when I'm in battle, carrying around all of this stuff. So needless to say, this is somebody who is massive in all ways. So he's extremely strong, he's extremely big, and he's extremely bold. He comes out constantly, and every day he's kind of messing with them. And he's saying, listen, I'm going to be the champion of the Philistines. He's not saying it as nice as me. I'm going to be the champion of the Philistines. I'm going to come out. You guys send somebody out to fight me. If you win, then we'll be your servants. If we win, you'll be our servants. If you win, we'll be your servants, right? So like the battle can be ended just by me fighting one of your people. Well, there's nobody that big. And what I find is really interesting is that Saul, if you guys remember, was the biggest of these people. So if anyone should have come out to Goliath, maybe it should. I mean, he's the leader, so maybe not, but I feel like he's the biggest. So I feel like maybe Saul should have been the one that was stepping up. But we can see that he does not. And so this is now like sort of being left open. We don't know what's happening, but we know that people are scared. Then we turn and we go back to David. So David's three brothers are in the war. They're in camp with Saul. They're there all the time. David isn't. He keeps going back and forth. So he comes back, he soothes Saul for a while, and then he goes back and he tends his sheep because he's got a job at home with a family. So we just see him going back and forth. At this point, where we meet Goliath for the first time, it seems as if David is home, right? So David is home, he's tending sheep. Well, at one point, the dad's like, hey, go bring your brothers some food. Here you go. Here's some food to bring to them. And so he comes up, and when he comes up, he sees that Goliath this has been 40 days at this point. So Goliath keeps coming out and he keeps saying all these things. And David's like, what is happening? So we see, I'm going to even reach out for a verse here. So it says in verse 26, David asks the men standing near him, what's going to be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes his disgrace from Israel? So that's his first question. So his first question is what will be done for the person who kills him, right? This is a disgrace. It's embarrassing that 40 days this guy keeps coming out and we haven't done anything about it. What's going to happen to the person who does do something about it? That's question one. Question two is who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Essentially, who does he think he is? We have God on our side. He can't come out here and threaten us like this. We have God on our side. Well, first I'll tell you what they get is so Saul says that if the person wins, they will get his daughter, they will have great wealth, and their whole family will be exempt from taxes. So whoever beats Goliath is going to be in a really good place financially, and obviously they're going to have Saul's daughter, so then they're going to be essentially sort of, I want to say, second in command to Saul, because they're going to be related to Saul from here on out, because they'll be his son-in-law. And so he asks this question, and his brothers get really mad. His brothers are like, you're so conceited, which I'm guessing, again, guessing. I'm assuming they're saying this because they're jealous, because they haven't stepped out and said anything. They haven't really been asking these questions, and they haven't been stepping up and saying that they're going to be the ones that go out and fight the Philistines. So now David comes in, he's kind of riling everybody up, right? Like, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? And what happens, right? He's asking different pockets of people. And so he says, his brother also mocks him. His brother says, and with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? So he's just reminding him, listen, you're just a shepherd, right? Like, don't come in here and try, like, we've been here, us and me and your two other brothers have been here, and don't come in here and kind of step to us and think that you're going to do anything with Goliath. So then David gets upset, obviously. He's like, what have I done? Can't I even speak? So then he goes to a bunch of other people, asks that same question, and then Saul hears about it. And when Saul hears about it, he calls David to his tent, and that's how we end for today. I wish we didn't end for today that way, because I feel like, I mean, it's kind of a cliffhanger, I guess. So, but I feel like there's more to the story that we haven't really finished the story. But that's how we're ending today. So we're going to find out tomorrow what David does, what Saul does with David. Does Goliath win, right? We're going to find out. We'll find out more tomorrow, so kind of stay tuned to see what happens. But that's it for today. So if you had felt blessed by anything that was said today, if you feel like your reading is growing, and I'm so hopeful that that's the case, and your faith with God is growing, I would like you to like this. I would like you to subscribe to the channel so you can get it every day, so it'll pop up on your feed every day. And I would like you to share it with people. Share your reading with people. Share what you're learning with people. Share and grow together. This is how we become a stronger, more faithful, loving, God-filled people. And of course, I always want you to keep reading, and we'll meet again tomorrow.